Welcome to 10 for 10, the podcast that delves into 10 modern Israel concepts each for about 10 minutes. We are Dr. Tal Grinfas David and Dr. Jonathan Golden, and today's episode is a continuation of our conversation from episode 5 about whether Israel's conceptual frameworks are broken concepts or unifying paradigms, given recent events and a desire to better understand future challenges that have not yet arisen. As a reminder, in our last episode, we concluded with the ways in which October 7th and its aftermath challenged previously held concepts and frameworks. When those frameworks no longer meet the moment and they need to be rebuilt or reconstructed, which concepts, ideals, and values might help us better understand the reality Israel is facing and will face in future generations? In this episode, we will explore a couple of universal frameworks that can be applied to Israel's history and at the present moment.
Jonathan, given the conceptia shvura, or the broken concept of reality we talked about in the previous episode, which framing would you offer to help listeners understand Israel today and in the future?
I've been thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs as one we can return to time and again in thinking about Israel's history, current moment, and future aspirations. The early years of the state saw a deep focus on the physiological, namely food and housing needs, which are the foundational level of Maslow's pyramid. And that period is known as the period of austerity. It's the sense of safety, the second level of Maslow's hierarchy, that is ever present in Israeli thinking and discourse. While other issues have played a role in Israeli politics, it is the collective sense of safety that often proves to define one's political stance. Even in the midst of security challenges both pre and post October 7th, Israel has achieved in a remarkable way in the higher rungs of Maslow's hierarchy. And those are a sense of belonging, esteem, intellectual achievement, and aesthetic or artistic achievement. In the post-October 7th moment, the return to the priority of safety drives so much of the consideration of contemporary frameworks and leaves one to wonder what other frameworks can both undergird a sense of safety and at the same time provide a sense of forward momentum. Paul, tell us about the power paradigm and how it functions as a framework to help us understand Israel.
I first heard about this acronym of power from Professor Ken Stein and have used it often to better gauge Israel's power, successes, and existential threats. It can be applied to examine any country in any era, not just modern Israel, for the viability and sustainability of that country. And it goes like this. P of power stands for peoplehood. A state's strength can be measured by the extent to which people share a common national identity, and when there is a critical mass of these people to defend and sustain it. When people are very polarized or stop believing in the state's future, the state becomes fragile, even susceptible to a civil war. O stands for organizations for self-rule and self-determination, such as effective health, education, defense, political parties, social needs, and so much more. The more effective these organizations are, the stronger the state becomes. W stands for water and vital natural resources like oil and gas and minerals, because when a country cannot secure these, it cannot sustain the population, its agriculture, transportation, military, and economy. E stands for economy and environment, because a strong economy that can withstand pressures helps the state achieve its goals and national interests. And if the environment is too harsh or polluted, it no longer becomes a desirable place to live. And finally, R of power stands for recognition from international organizations, states, non-state actors, and superpowers. When a state's neighbors and world entities do not recognize its right to exist, it will be in a constant state of peril. Jonathan, given our two frameworks for Israel, namely Maslow's hierarchy and the acronym POWER, how can we better contextualize Israel's priorities and goals given the challenges it now faces in the region?
At this moment, it is hard to see beyond the basic needs and the needs of safety. Given the demands of the ongoing hostage situation, as well as the extended service by reservists in the Army, it seems as if those physiological needs of food and housing will be front and center for some time. With that said, there are those who are looking to the future to prioritize belonging and a sense of esteem in the region. The Abraham Accords represent that promise. As we discussed in the last episode, Israel has signed peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, both immediate neighbors. The Abraham Accords signified new relations with Morocco, Bahrain, and the UAE in terms of cultural and economic exchange. Some believe they suggest a promise of relationships with even more countries in the Arab and Muslim world, challenging the framework that Israel would not expand its relations with more of the Arab and Muslim world until there is a framework for a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Might the R of recognition through the Abraham Accords suggest another path of an outer ring strategy for peace, meaning that Israel's peace outside of its borders will lead to peace within its borders?
Understanding that military might alone cannot create a stable future for Israel, diplomatic efforts leading to Israel's recognition will need to continuously evolve. It is difficult to predict what the future will hold as we don't have a crystal ball, but here's what we can say. Saudi Arabia refused to normalize relations with Israel, conditioning that upon the establishment of a Palestinian state. France has recently signaled they will call for a Palestinian state to be created. And starting with the 79th General Assembly session, the Palestinian delegation can submit proposals and amendments and can sit among member states in the UN General Assembly. At the same time, Israel cannot afford for radical Islam to have fertile spaces on its borders, regardless of who will be the future Palestinian leadership. While Hamas, whose charter calls for Israel's destruction, still exerts power over the Palestinians in Gaza and gains more support in the West Bank, and while the Palestinian Authority still pays families of terrorists monthly salaries in a pay-to-slay policy, a two-state reality seems to be an international fantasy, where neither Israeli nor Palestinian leaders see that outcome as a desirable or viable reality. International efforts to reestablish Lebanon's control of Hezbollah's strongholds in the south may actually lead to pathways to a peace agreement between Lebanon and Israel in the distant future. Seeds that are planted now may not bear fruit for many years, but long, steady efforts in the interests of both nations could produce positive results. And remember, it took 30 years after Egypt for Jordan to sign normalization with Israel. In 2022, then Prime Minister Yair Lapid was able to negotiate a maritime border with Lebanon, enabling both countries to mine offshore natural gas without conflict. Even then, former Lebanese President Michel Aoun emphasized that the accord did not constitute a peace agreement with Israel, describing the deal as purely technical and not recognition of Israel. He added that the accord would prevent war with Israel and that the full status of the southern border would be resolved later through dialogue. More recently, U.S. efforts to denuclearize Iran and to keep the Houthis at bay have given Israel some hope that American involvement in the region will offer more security and stability for Israel until a time when new relations in the region can be established.
It is notable to have seen in action the broad coalition that came together in April of 2024 to defend Israel in response to Iranian drone and missile attack. The coordination between multiple countries would not have been possible without years of planning and organization by the United States, Israel, and key Arab countries in the region. It is one tangible sign of all of these countries developing a collective sense of what safety and security might look like in the region. Paul, where else could Israel turn to enhance esteem, recognition, and long-term relations?
Well, let's look at Syria as a case study using the acronym of power, because some have been optimistic that now Assad's brutal regime has been replaced. Using the P of peoplehood, the ongoing conflict among the Sunnis and Shiites there, the recent persecution of Alawites, Christians, Armenians, and other minorities, and the Turkish forces that have been seeking to exert influence in Syria all point to a very fractured society. The extent to which Syrians are preoccupied with maintaining power internally will determine how free they will become to attacking Israel or to negotiating terms with Israel. Let's look at O. Will they be able to maintain organizations for self-rule? If we consider that Ahmed al-Shara, a former rebel commander with ties to jihadist groups, has appointed himself both president and prime minister, and adopted a constitution that does not protect minorities, Israeli security will have to hang on his word, and Israel should take very seriously any incitement as a precursor to violence. We have already seen that when he called for the liberation of Al-Aqsa, Syrian groups attempted to attack Israeli forces on the Golan Heights. Look at W. Today, and even before, under Assad's regime, the Syrian government has been unable to sustain basic needs, water, gas, oil for the population, which if left unanswered may result in a similar rebellion as was seen in the 2011 uprising, when there was a 40% drop in potable water availability. Economically, Syria is an impoverished state, which enjoys the funding and the awe of recognition of richer and more radicalized Arab nations. So, until a time when Syria fulfills its own acronym of power for stability, it remains a source of concern for Israeli security and normalization. I suggest Israel should look elsewhere in the region to enhance long-term relations for stability. Jonathan, you stated that at present, the basic needs of security and stability are paramount for Israel, and they color Israel's present and future. In light of the ongoing judicial reform efforts, the burden on the IDF and the families of those who serve, the protests of the Orthodox against enlisting, the economic hardships facing Israelis after October 7th, and the general acrimony in politics, does Maslow's hierarchy of needs give you hope or concern for Israel's future? And what would you suggest Jews around the world do to strengthen Israel at this time?
Maslow's hierarchy paints a realistic picture of what Israel faces in the coming months and years. It will be challenging to meet the basic human needs in many Israeli communities and restore a sense of safety for all. It will take the restoration of safety and basic needs to focus on the areas of esteem and self-actualization. For me, the glimmer of hope lies in the countless examples of individuals who gave back to the collective society through a deep sense of belonging. In his book, The Eighth Day, written in the aftermath of October 7th, philosopher Micha Goodman tries to provide a new framework for the Israeli political center that incorporates the best of individualism and a sense of collective belonging. In terms of Jews around the world, it is vital that they continue to express and manifest a rekindled sense of peoplehood that has only grown since October 7th. The sense of safety will increase with a heightened sense of belonging of the Jewish people to one another. How can the framework of power help with both understanding in this time and perhaps with a sense of unity?
I think the acronym of power is still unifying in times of hardship, because it can be not only used to analyze how powerful the state of Israel was from its pre-state period to the present, but also it can be applied to future events that have not yet taken place. To me, Israel is an experiment in Jewish sovereignty, not to be taken for granted. And understanding this framework of power can even help people around the world who care about Israel to identify the best ways to help strengthen and sustain Israel's future for decades to come. They may find outlets to bolster peoplehood and to create respectful dialogue about our differences. They may want to support organizations and nonprofits that best serve their vision for Israel. They might want to help secure vital natural resources and promote innovations in clean energy. They may want to invest in the Israeli startup economy or donate to Israelis in need. And they may find outlets to advocate for Israel's recognition when others seek to denounce its right to exist. Thank you for listening to Israel's Frameworks, Broken Concepts, or Unifying Paradigms. Please visit our websites, heartstance.org and tgdconsulting.org, to download our Family and Educator Guide with links to these frameworks, additional resources, and discussion prompts.